The Southern Railway was one of the big four railway companies formed by the grouping of the railways in 1923 from the many smaller railway companies, the largest being the London and South Western Railway. The Southern linked London with the Channel ports, South West England and Kent. It was the smallest of the big four railway companies, and unlike the others, the majority of its revenue came from passenger rather than from freight. The first of the Southern Railway steam engines on show is one of the locos it inherited from the railway companies before 1923. This is the only surviving example of the once 97-strong O Class of the Southeastern and Chatham Railway, and is seen arriving at the Bluebell Railway's terminus of Sheffield Park. The Southeastern and Chatham Railway was a joining together of two nearby railway rivals, the Southeastern Railway and the London, Chatham and Dover Railway. The companies had competed extensively over the same area, with some of the bitterest conflicts ever seen between British railway companies. Competing routes to the same destination were built, and so many towns in Kent were served by both companies, and left with a legacy of 2 stations and services to multiple London termini. The O Class were an 060 design and were first introduced in 1882. and continued in production until 1899. They were designed by the Southeastern and Chatham Railways Chief Mechanical Engineer James Stirling. James Stirling was, for a time, apprenticed to his brother Patrick Stirling, who went on to be the Chief Mechanical Engineer of the Great Northern Railway. James Stirling became the Chief Mechanical Engineer for the Southeastern Railway in 1878, after leaving the Glasgow and South Western Railway. A total of 122 O Class locos were built at the Southeastern and Chatham Railway's own railway works at Ashford and at Sharp Stewart and Company in Manchester. Number 65 was built at Ashford Works in September 1896 and was one of the 58 members of the class rebuilt from 1903 onwards. 65 herself was rebuilt in 1908. '65 survived into British Railways ownership and was finally withdrawn in June 1961. In 1963, number 65 was purchased by Mr. Lewis Evans and kept at the Ashford Steam Centre until its closure. She was returned to steam in time for the centenary of the joining of the Southeastern and the London, Chatham and Dover Railways in August 1999. One of the UK's most scenic preserved lines is the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, an 18-mile track through the North York Moors from Pickering to Gromont. The RAF station of Fylingdales sticks out like a big blot on the landscape. As a preserved member of the schools class, thunders towards Pickering. A quick drive to the terminus and we can get to Pickering before the train. The station wasn't originally a terminus, as before its closure by British Railways in 1965, it was merely a stop on the way from Whitby on the east coast to Malton and York. After a couple of minutes, we can see this schools class loco making an impressive sight as she enters Pickering's Platform 1. "40 schools class locomotives were introduced in 1930, and the class earned their nickname as they were all named after English public schools. They were the most powerful 440 locomotives in service in Great Britain." Wearing her British Railways colours and number of 30926 is Repton. The schools class came about when the Southern Railway needed a new secondary express passenger locomotive to run over lines with difficult weight and cornering problems. Because of the sharp curves on these lines, a relatively short wheelbase was needed, and so the 440 design was used, instead of the more usual 460. The basic layout of the class was heavily influenced by the existing Lord Nelson class 460 design. Indeed, certain parts were the same for standardisation purposes. The first batch of 10 locomotives were built at Eastleigh Works in 1930. 30 more were built until 1935. The class became known as the schools class, with the naming of the locomotives after public schools in the Southern Railways area. However, several foreign schools outside the Southern Railway catchment area were used, including Rugby, Malvern and Repton, which is in Derbyshire, much more the London, Midland and Scottish Railways territory. Repton has had an interesting life in preservation, which she started in 1966, when she was purchased and overhauled at Eastleigh, before moving to the USA. She was donated to Steamtown in Vermont, USA. Steamtown loaned the engine to the Cape Breton Steam Railway in Canada, where she operated a regular passenger service. In 1989, she was sold again and returned to the UK, to the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, where she was again overhauled and found to be in good condition. She now runs regularly on the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. Another school's class loco in preservation is Stowe, which is currently a static display at the Bluebell Railway, awaiting a comprehensive rebuild. The next class of Southern Railway steam locomotives are the mighty Battle of Britain class. These were streamlined 462 Pacific locomotives, designed by the Chief Mechanical Engineer of the Southern Railway between 1937 and the 1948 nationalisation, Oliver Vaughan Snell Bulleid. The Battle of Britain class included many new developments in British steam engine design and manufacture. They were amongst the first British locos to use welding in their construction process. They were also fitted with steel fireboxes, which meant that the components could be more easily constructed during the wartime austerity and post-war economy. The Battle of Britain class were identical to the West Country class, in all but names. The West Country class were named by the Southern Railway after places in the West Country served by its trains, or close to its lines. Whereas the Battle of Britain class had names after RAF squadrons, airfields, commanders and aircraft that participated in the Battle of Britain over Kent. This example is 34081, named 92 Squadron, and is seen on the North Norfolk Railway. Number 92 Squadron of the Royal Air Force was a fighter squadron which was originally formed as part of the Royal Flying Corps in September 1917 and was reformed in October 1939. In the spring of 1940, the unit became one of the first RAF units to receive the Supermarine Spitfire. The Battle of Britain and West Country classes were built between 1945 and 1951, making them one of the designs carried on in manufacture after British Railways was formed. 34081 was built in Brighton in 1948, making her one of the 40 engines made by British Railways. The British Railways versions had several little differences to the original Southern Railway engines, the most significant being a wider footplate and a larger capacity tender. The class was intended primarily for express and semi-fast passenger trains in southern England, ranging from the Channel ports of the South East England to the West Country resorts of the South West of England. As an extra design challenge for Bulleid, the new class had to be equally adept at both freight workings and branch line stopping trains, both of which required low axle loading and a good turn of speed. The class also became known by their spotters nickname, Spam Cans. '92 Squadron disbanded in 1994, although recently the Tactics and Training Wing of the Air Welfare Centre has become number 92 Squadron, meaning that the name lives on. Another West Country Class loco is 34092, City of Wells. Seen here, partway through her heavy overhaul. The next steam locomotive of the Southern Railway came from one of the former railway companies before the Railways Act of 1921. This is one of the members of the A1 class of locomotives, called Stepney, and is one of only a few real-life engines to be mentioned by name in the Reverend W. Awdry's books, the Railway series, entitled Stepney, the Bluebell engine. The A1 class were designed for the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway, more commonly known as the Brighton line. Its territory formed a rough triangle, with London at its apex, and the whole coastline of Sussex and a large part of Surrey at its base. The class were a 060T steam locomotive, which were more commonly known by their nickname of terriers. 060 locomotives have a wheel arrangement of 6 powered driving wheels and no leading or trailing wheels. Tank engines have their water in tanks at either side of the boiler, unlike larger engines which store their water in the tender. Stepney was the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway's number 55 and was introduced to traffic in 1875. The class were named after places in the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway's patch. Stepney being an inner-city district of the London borough of Tower Hamlets, forming part of the East End of London. These A1 terriers survived for decades after more modern designs had been scrapped, working on lightly laid branch lines. Here, these little engines were often the only ones light enough to cross bridges. In later years, Stepney was particularly associated with the Hayling Island branch, until she was sold to the Bluebell Railway in May 1960 as the Preserved Railway's first locomotive. At present, Stepney is a static display in the Bluebell Railway's locomotive shed, but its popularity always causes it to bounce back to the top of the railway's priorities. At her next overhaul, she will require new cylinders, the castings for which are already to hand. Here she is back in 2002, in action on the Bluebell Railway. Stepney isn't the only member of the A1 class to survive in preservation. Numbered 672, this is Fenchurch, another A1 class working today on the Bluebell Railway, and in fine condition. She has arrived at the south terminus of the Bluebell Railway, Sheffield Park. Fenchurch was actually sold by the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway to the New Haven Harbour Company in June 1898, only to be acquired by the Southern Railway in 1926. She was bought by the Bluebell Railway in the spring of 1964 for £750 as a working engine. At the grand age of 91 years, she was the oldest locomotive to have worked on British railways. She worked on the Bluebell Railway until 1970 and received an overhaul ready for her centenary in 1972.
If your feet aren't burning, then you're not doing it right. What? When your feet aren't burning, you're not doing it right. Is that what it is?
The A1s were designed by William Stroudley, and 50 were built between 1872 and 1874 to 1880. Of those 50, a total of 10 survive in preservation, including number 80, named Box Hill, which is part of the National Collection at the National Railway Museum at York. Stroudley designed these A1s for lightweight block trains, particularly in the London area where the track was generally of poor construction.
There we are. I have complained to Railway Magazine. They got a picture of Gladstone, the caption XFECR locomotive Gladstone. Yeah, I get a big file in there, but really poke it in.
The stations on the Bluebell Railway have been restored to show different periods of the railway's life. Sheffield Park has been restored to a generally Victorian ambience, as it would have appeared during the time of the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway up to 1922. The other stations on the line are restored in the style of the Southern Railway and the early British Railways period, from the 1950s. As the line passed the neck of Sheffield Park Station is single track, Fenchurch has to wait for the arrival of the former Southeastern and Chatham Railways O Class, number 65, we saw earlier. With number 65 in the platform, Fenchurch can depart. (1618) is a member of the Southern Railway U Class of Mogul 260 locomotives, designed by Richard Maunsell for cross-country and semi-fast express passenger workings. A total of 50 of the class were built between 1928 and 1931 at the Southern Railway's Ashford and Brighton works. The first 20 members of the class were rebuilds of the earlier K class of locomotives during 1928 and were soon given the nickname U-boats. The 30 new examples were built until 1931, again at the Ashford and Brighton works. 4 have been preserved, and 1618 has been at the Bluebell Railway since 1977. On withdrawal from British Railways service at Guildford in 1964, she went to Barry Scrapyard in South Wales, and was the second of the many locomotives to leave the yard for preservation. The U-Class's wheel arrangement of 260 has a pair of leading wheels, followed by 6 driving wheels, an arrangement commonly known as a Mogul design. 1618 is at present a static display at the Bluebell Railway's engine shed, having worked for the last time in 1994. She is currently awaiting an overhaul, but with sister U Class Loco 1638 in operational service, 1618 has dropped down the works queue. Earlier we saw the Battle of Britain Class 34081 92 Squadron, complete with its streamlined form. This is an example of the several members of the Battle of Britain and West Country classes, which were rebuilt by British Railways in an attempt to make them more like conventional locomotives. This is 34028 Eddystone, named after Eddystone Rocks in Devon. She was built in April 1946 at the Southern Railway's Brighton works and was rebuilt in 1957. The problem was with some of the more unique features of Bulleid's original design, such as the Bulleid chain-driven valve gear, which prompted British Railways to rebuild a total of 60 locomotives. The resulting rebuilds produced a locomotive very similar to the rebuilt Merchant Navy class. After withdrawal in May 1964, Eddystone went to the Barry scrapyard, only to be saved for preservation. At present, she is operational at the Swanage Railway. After steam was withdrawn from British Railways, several classes of diesel and electric locomotives ran over the former Southern Railway network. This is the only surviving member of the once 24-strong Class 71 electric locomotives, E5001, which was built in Doncaster in 1958 and is now preserved at the National Railway Museum. The Southern Railway developed a large network of electrified lines based on the 750-volt DC third rail system, and these locomotives were designed to run on that system, although they did have an overhead pantograph. The end for the class came in 1977, when they were replaced by more modern designs. The freight services previously worked by the Southern Railway's steam locomotives are worked by several different diesel locomotives. This one is the most common, the Class 66. Several of the freight services operated by the company Freightliner are hauled by rebuilt Class 47 locomotives dating back to 1964. These are called Class 57s and rebuilt between 1997 and 2004 and have the nickname Body Snatchers. Passenger services over the Southern Railway network are today hauled by a mix of diesel and electric multiple units. This is a Class 170, which started in production in 1998 and can be seen all over the British Rail network, not just in the former southern area. Long-distance cross-country services are operated by the Voyager diesel multiple units, formerly run by Virgin, and now Arriva Cross Country. But none of these have the grace, power and style of the steam locomotives of the Southern Railway.